Hello, I'm Chase Godschalk, and today is June 26, 2025. I'm here in Carrollton, Georgia, to interview Beheruz Sethna. This is part of the FIRE's Oral History Project, and now I will ask Beheruz to state his full name, birth date, and where he currently resides.
My name is Beheruz Sethna, and I am a professor at the University of West Georgia. I reside in Carrollton, Georgia, and next month, which is July, I will be 77 years old. July of 2025, I will be 77 years old. I was born on the 31st of July, 1948.
Great, thank you. All right, now we'll start the interview. So first, to begin your story, describe your early childhood memories, how you grew up, your neighborhood, that kind of.
I was born in Bombay, India, the city that used to be called Bombay, India, and I still call it Bombay. And I was born in a small family. It was just my parents and me. I have no siblings. Had a very, to my mind, interesting childhood. We were not at all wealthy. We were not on the streets, or I didn't have to worry where my next meal was coming from. We had a comfortable home. But by US standards, it would be below the poverty line. That meant that I had everything I really needed: food on the table, a comfortable bed, but I had zero cool stuff, nothing. My parents transferred me into a school where very common that you have school uniforms in India, and the idea of school uniforms is to keep the costs low, but we couldn't even afford those school uniforms. So I wore hand-me-down school uniforms for first couple of years, and things got a little better as time went on, but we really never had a lot of money. So when I say no cool stuff, I just want to give the audience an idea of what I'm talking about. Our family income was roughly 500 Indian rupees a month. Things have changed since then, but in today's terms, that would be something like $3 or $4 a month for a family of three. But of course, that was a long time ago, and that was. I rode to school on dinosaurs, so it was a long time ago. But still, even in those days, 500 rupees a month was not a lot of money. So the idea of having cool shoes or clothes or whatever was completely unknown. Presents that I remember getting for Christmas or holidays like that were of the order of a few cents. Literally 2 comic books was a big present for me. I used to love Superman comics, and so that was the height of high living for me, that I got a present of 2 comic books. So this is the way I grew up. No discretionary or conspicuous consumption items at all. We didn't have a TV. Of course, that was part of the reason was the technology, but we didn't have a TV till I was in graduate school. And my parents couldn't afford vacations or anything like that. This was a conscious decision. I remember my mother telling me when I was in middle school that they didn't have money, and they would put every penny they had into my education. I thought at that time, even at that time, I thought that was great. And today, I can't stop thanking them for their vision, because the vision of education and higher education was theirs. They instilled that in me at a very, very young age, and I'm forever grateful to them for that. So that's how I grew up, quite okay. But as I said, I couldn't even afford a snack. So if I wanted to have a snack, I would walk home from school and save the small amount of bus fare and then have a snack on the way. So that's how I grew up. Now, their love of education, their desire for me to have the best education was awesome. my father, and we talk about parental pressure. Yes, there was pressure. When I was a kid in high school, a new institution came to being. It was called the Indian Institute of Technology, or IIT. And that was an engineering institution. It was the vision of the leadership of the country to create world-class engineering facilities. And when that was in its infancy, my father cut out a little thing from the newspaper and would carry it around with him in his wallet and would show it to me from time to time, saying, "This is where I want you to go." And I was 5 years away from even being eligible to apply. So that's the kind of background that they created. To cut a long story short, I did end up going to the IIT and IIT Bombay, and graduated from there in electrical engineering. This was a very tough thing, but I have to step back a bit. When I was a kid, my mother pretty much ran my homework systems. I mean, she would tell me to do homework, and she kept a good tight rein on me, and I did reasonably well. When I was in high school, I goofed off. I was not a bad person. I didn't get into any drinks or drugs or anything like that. But I just didn't work, and did very badly, actually terribly badly in high school. In my pre-final year of high school, it was not called the junior year in India, but that's what it would be called here. In my pre-final year in math, I got a grand total of 34 out of 100. And that was 3 parts of math. Arithmetic, I got 0 out of 30. Geometry, I got 4 out of 35. And algebra, I got 30 out of 35. That was, and I almost flunked the whole year because I had a language in which I didn't do well either. So because the school rules allowed you to combine things, I passed the year. But my parents said that this won't do. At that point, and so that vacation, the summer break between my pre-final, my final year, I had no vacation. I had to go for private tuitions every day, and this little old lady would give me tons of homework to do every day. So that's how my last high school vacation was. That it was just doing math. And it worked, because a year from that time, when I got that 34 out of 100, in my final exam, which is what mattered in Indian high schools, only the final exam mattered. Your 4 years did not matter. My final exam in math, I got 95 out of 100. So I went from 34 to 95 in 1 year. And what's more important is I learned my lesson. I understood the value of hard work. And although I was goofing off in other subjects, I suddenly got scared and woke up and worked very hard. And it worked. I got into the college of my choice. And from that day, which I actually remember that day, it was the 4th of March of 1964. That day is the day I started working hard. And I've never stopped working since that day. I work really hard. And that's what has helped me in life.
So we know you have completed your high school career, you go to college, but then what's next after that?
So in college, in my undergraduate program at IIT, so I did 2 years of liberal arts college and then 5 years of IIT. Now, again, for an American or a North American audience, I have to point out that I could have saved 1 year. I got into IIT after my first year of the liberal arts college, chose not to go there because I didn't get electrical engineering in Bombay. I got electrical engineering in other places, but I wanted to have electrical engineering and I wanted to have Bombay. So I turned it down, and I may be one of the only idiots on the face of this earth who actually turned down an admission into IIT Bombay, but I did. And my dad was very disappointed because I told you 5 years before that he'd been carrying around an ad saying, "This is where I want you to go." So he was very disappointed, but he said, what you have to do is work harder. And next year, appear again, and this time maybe you will get admission into IIT Bombay with electrical. But the next year, I did very well. Next year, he didn't trust me. So he came with me to the final process. And there was in those days, used to be a blackboard, and they would put X marks. Everything was by rank. So the first person got his or her choice of ranks, of disciplines and location. And then the next person, and so on. So when a branch was full or a location was full, they'd put a little X on a blackboard. So he was with me when I was on the first day of interviews because I'd done well. So he looked at the board and said, there are no X marks on the board. You go in there and you come out with that paper in your hand, because you can have any branch you want in any location you want. So he didn't trust me to make that decision. It's probably wise not to do that. Anyway, so I got electrical in Bombay. It was a very tough program. Again, give you a little bit of background. The American news TV show, 60 Minutes, did an episode, a full episode on my alma mater, IIT Bombay. And in that, they referred to it as possibly the most rigorous program in the world, rigorous curriculum in the world. And I felt every bit of it. So I got into IIT Bombay, but I was no star student. I struggled. I struggled for the full 5 years. It's a 5-year lockstep program. This is not 5 years because I was goofing off or anything like that. 5-year lockstep program, fully residential, and I struggled through it. I was not at the bottom of the class. I was certainly not at the top of the class. I was somewhere in between. The one thing I did do well is leadership in extracurricular activities. So I was very good in extracurriculars, put a lot of effort into it. I was the equivalent of the SGA president. I checked all the major extracurricular boxes. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't do it to get American admissions. But it was certainly helpful to me when I did apply to America. Because in America, this is extracurricular leadership activities is a big plus. In India, nobody cared. But I did it because I wanted to do it. And it came in useful later on. But after I finished IIT, most of my classmates went to America. I didn't want to go. I did an MBA in India, again at a very prestigious MBA school set up by Harvard, and did well there. So by the time I finished or was finishing IIM, which is the Indian Institute of Management, I had academic credentials from IIT Bombay that were excellent but not at the top of the class. I had IIM credentials that were close to the top of the class, and I had a solid body of extracurricular activities. So I was a good candidate to apply to American universities, and I applied to American universities for my PhD, 3 Ivy League schools, got into all 3. 1 national stature, non-Ivy, got into that. But I also applied to 3 B-level state schools, and I got rejected from all of them. So I don't know why I got rejected, but I did. And those were the first 3 letters I received. I got all my rejections first and didn't know where I was going. I didn't think I would see America ever in my life. But then the other admissions came in, and they were good. So I came to America basically to do my PhD, and chose Columbia, turning down other Ivy League institutions because the top name in my field in marketing and consumer behavior was at Columbia. And that was a bit of a gamble, because just because you go to a school, you don't know that you're actually going to work with this star professor. But it worked out, because I did ask him whether I could do my work with him, and he kind of tested me and didn't make a decision immediately, but then ultimately did. I did my PhD with him, and I'm delighted that I did that.
Did you face any challenges, perchance, when you moved to the United States, like financially or?
Financially, it was an interesting situation. I I got a good scholarship from Columbia, and they gave me the scholarship in two parts. One was just a plain scholarship. You get the money. And the other part was, we'll give you a loan that you have to pay back. So I looked at all the numbers when I was in India, and I said to myself, I really don't need the loan. My whole life, I have been without money. My whole life. I don't need this fluff stuff that will come with the loan. So I said, I really don't care about that loan portion. I don't need it. You have to take it. Columbia insisted that that was a package deal. And they referred to something in their letter called a co-maker. You'll need an American co-maker. What that means, now I know what that means is that you need an American citizen to co-sign the loan. Well, I didn't know any American citizen. I was a just student, kind of fresh off the boat, except it was a plane, fresh off the plane. And I had no idea. So I go to Columbia and I say, I'm here, give me my money. And they said, well, where's your co-maker who has to be an American citizen? I said, I don't know any American citizens. Well, they said, then we can't give you the loan. And if we can't give you the loan, we can't give you the scholarship. So on my very first day at Columbia, I was like someone had hit me in the gut with a sucker punch. I had no idea how I was going to survive. Now, Columbia helped me out in that they took care of my tuition. But I had no money to live on. So while I was searching, I desperately contacted my parents saying, do you know any Americans who would be willing to sign? And that's a tough thing. You can't trip up a passing American and say, will you sign my loan papers for me? Because they don't know you. Yeah. So my first year was very difficult, money-wise. I literally had no money and every night I went to bed hungry. I mean, literally, I never starved in India when I was a kid, but I starved in America. My first year in America, I went to bed hungry every single night because I had no money. I would buy a huge loaf of stale bread that you got at a discount at a supermarket and a can of spaghetti and meatballs, and I'd have some of that between two slices of bread for lunch and the remainder in the evening. And that's how I lived for 10 months, my first 10 months in America. One day I came across a less expensive can that I bought, and fortunately I picked up 6 of them originally, saying, boy, this is cheap, so let me buy it. Fortunately, I said, well, let me taste it first. Turned out to be dog food. So I'll tell you how hungry I was. I considered very seriously eating the dog food that night. I didn't, but I starved that night. I didn't have anything, not even my. So very difficult. My first year was difficult. Then we found someone who was willing to sign for me. My wife to be at the time had an uncle who was an American citizen. He was willing to co-sign for me, and we got money, and we were okay after that. Still not a lot of money, but at least we had money enough to live on and so on. So that was that. But my first year, I lost probably 20 pounds or more. When I returned to India, I was skin and bone, literally. But it was an interesting experience because I focused on my studies and no money to do anything else, and I did well.
So now you're a professor at West Georgia. So how did you transition from being a student at Columbia, almost starving, to getting to this point now where you are?
So at the end, coming to the end of my Columbia time, see, I had come to India to come to America to do my PhD. I had full intention of returning to India. I did not intend to make my life in America. So I was a person possessed. I wanted to get the PhD done and maybe get a year or so of American experience and then go back to India. That was the objective. So I went through my PhD at record speed. When I completed my PhD, it was a record at Columbia. I completed my PhD in 2 years, 1 semester, and 1 day. So 28 months, which is a complete record for people at Columbia. People would take 7 years and so on, and even then, sometimes they risk being thrown out because they hadn't finished. So I went through it like gangbusters and got it done because my intention was to return to India. So I did do a very solid PhD thanks to my advisor because he let me use his data. I built a model meaning not a physical model but a mathematical model that used my electrical engineering concepts that I had learned from electrical engineering and created that to understand human behavior. So a PhD is supposed to be a new contribution to knowledge. So this gave me this thing because nobody else had used electrical engineering to understand human behavior. So that was a good thing. That I did on my own, but I approached my doctoral advisor to say, can I use your data to validate my model? That will give comparison whether my model can do as good a job as your model did. And my model actually did a better job than his model did using his data. Now that not only gave me a huge academic plus to complete my PhD, but it saved me a lot of time in collection of data. I didn't actually have to collect any data because I was using existing data. So it was a good thing, and that's why I was able to finish in record time. When I was coming to completion of my PhD, I applied to several places, and being a potential graduate from Columbia, I had some credibility. But I was late in the year because I actually completed my PhD much faster than anyone expected me to. So I missed the main recruiting season because I was actually completing a year early, or much more than a year early. So I was late in the recruiting season, so I didn't have much choice. I went for an interview to one very, very prestigious place, which I will not name. Didn't particularly gel over there. I mean, they offered me the job, to do them credit, but I was not happy at that place. So then I chose to go to a place called Clarkson University, which is a small school, but a Research 1 institution. And that Research 1 is an academic classification. That's the top level of university you can have. So I went to Clarkson with the expectation that I would be there for a year, year and a half, and then return to India. When I was coming to the end of my first year, I applied for an extension of my visa. I was on a student visa. And then in those days, it was probably easier than it is now to get a green card. I also applied for a green card. But still, I thought that I was going to return to India. And I did. At the end of, I forget exactly how many years I'd finished at Clarkson, probably 2.5 years. I sold off everything. My wife and I, we had a little baby girl at that time. We sold off everything. I canceled the rental on my apartment. But I didn't resign from my job. I asked for a year of leave. Kept that in abeyance. Packed up and went to India with the intention of staying there. Had a good professional time in India, but at the end of that, I really wanted to come back. So I resurrected my old job, which I had kept, and they were happy with me, so I came back to America and then stayed at Clarkson, and stayed at Clarkson for 13 years. That includes that year of leave. I stayed at Clarkson for 13 years. In academic life, you join as an assistant professor, assuming that you have your PhD in hand, which I did. And then you go through a 6-year period that's a very scary period, because at the end of that 6 years they evaluate you for tenure. Tenure is something that you get, which is, people think of it as a lifetime guarantee of employment. It's not really that, especially in today's world, but it's a presumption that you will receive a new contract. That's the presumption. So tenure, getting tenure at a research one institution is a tough job, but I did it. I got tenure. I got promoted to associate professor. Years later I got promoted to full professor. So I checked all my academic boxes at Clarkson, which is great because, as I said, it's a research one university and I have those credentials. But in the meantime I was also developing some administrative experience. I was a department chair. I stepped down because I really wanted to be a faculty member full time, and then they asked me to do it again and again, and so I was a department chair for about 10 years. And then my wife started kicking me in the rear to say, we really need to look at other options, look beyond Clarkson and at higher opportunities. So I applied for dean's positions. And by that time my resume was quite strong. So I got several dean offers and chose one at Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas. Now I want you to understand that I was in the northern part of New York at Clarkson. Clarkson is, snow is measured in feet at Clarkson. It's not measured in inches. And I lived there for 13 years. My daughter was born in the middle of a snowstorm. And then I went to Beaumont, Texas, which is hot and humid. And so I have had both those experiences, extreme blue state to extreme red state in Texas. I did well in both situations. But at that point, when I was becoming a dean, it became slightly problematic because of, I guess, what you could loosely call an unwillingness to have a foreign-born, non-white person as being dean. And that there was some resistance there. But they did ultimately, after the interview, they did want me to come, and so I went there and had a good career there. 3 years down the road, I was still officially dean, but they made me interim executive vice president, which is called a provost or the second in command sort of thing. And then before I went back to dean, because that was an interim, I knew I had to go back to being dean. Before I did that, I applied for president's positions elsewhere. And then I got this presidency over here. Again, we had some of the same problems of being the wrong color and the wrong race and the wrong national origin and so on. But for whatever reason, we had broad-minded people who overcame that and appointed me president. And this is where I've been for the past 31 years. 19 of those 31 as president of the university, and the next 12 years as a full-time faculty professor.
Well, so you talked about how now you're a West Georgia professor. What is your family life like now?
So the family life was tough in the early years of my career. As I said, and this is true for everybody. It's not me especially. Your first 6 years at any institution are the pre-tenure years. That's when you're sweating whether you're going to get tenure or not. That is also corresponds to childbearing and child-rearing ages. And it's particularly difficult for women, which I have to say as an aside that I'm very proud of, that during my 19 years as president of the University of West Georgia, for 2 non-consecutive years I was interim executive vice chancellor, senior vice chancellor first, and then executive vice chancellor. And during that time I persuaded the Board of Regents to change their rules on tenure such that we allow people to stop the tenure clock for reasons of childbearing, child rearing, even elder care. Again, this is disproportionately impacts women, but it's when you make a new policy, it has to be for both. So even men can take advantage of that. But I'm particularly proud of the impact I've had on women's careers, because now you can actually stop the tenure clock during that time. So family life suffers a great deal during those pre-tenure years. It was challenging, but I still I love being a dad. I mean, today I love being a dad. I love being a granddad. That's something that gives me great satisfaction. So I would kind of be there for my children. During that period, my wife did a master's degree. So for a year, she was not physically gone because she still lived at home, but she was mentally gone. So I took care of the kids, and I was happy to do that. This is something that has given me great joy. My family life, my children, I am so incredibly proud of them. I haven't spoken of them yet, but my daughter is a surgeon, my son is an attorney, and he's not only general counsel for his firm, he's also general manager. I have 4 wonderful, wonderful grandchildren. So that gives me great meaning in life. The thing that has given me more meaning than anything else in my life, even in spite of all career accomplishments, is my family and my children, my grandchildren. They are the ultimate number one for me. Of course, I've never lost track of the sacrifices my parents made for me and that my wife continues to make for me, but that my children, my grandchildren are the light of my life.
So I know your children are important to you, but your faith is too, obviously. So what does being a Zoroastrian mean to you in
Now,
the
this
United
is a
States?
very excellent question you ask. So there's a phrase in Zoroastrian daily prayers that translated is, all blessings flow from Ahura Mazda, which is God. And I not only say this every day, I believe it. During my life, I have been truly blessed. I mean, when I became dean, I was the first Indian-born dean of any accredited, business accredited school in America. When I became president, I was the first president of Indian origin for an American university. And I was, over a period of my first 10 years as president, I essentially, except for small aberrations and exceptions, was the only president in America. So I have been truly blessed. At West Georgia, we've accomplished incredible change. I certainly give credit to my colleagues who helped that change come through, and my friends and my supporters. But at the end of the day, I don't believe that anything can happen without God's blessing. And so I, as I said, not only say those words, I mean them. And every 5 years as president, while I was president, and it's, when you're president, you get the blame for everything and you get the credit for everything. One person told me, I think the first day I was at West Georgia, he said, I hope you know what your job definition is. It is that if someone spills coffee on the carpet, it's your fault. That's the definition of president. You get the blame for everything. But you also get the credit for a whole lot of stuff that you haven't done yourself. So I used to write this column in the local newspaper, and the headline was a very provocative headline, "Don't look at me, somebody else did it." And that headline, I used the same headline for the columns every 5 years. And in that column, that's a phrase usually used to deflect blame. You know, especially if you're a kid and your brother and sister does something, you say, don't look at me, that person did it. I deliberately chose that, but I used it to deflect credit. So saying when people praise me for some great thing we've done on campus, I actually name names. I said, it's not I who did it, it's so and so who did it. So if you want to thank someone, please thank that person. And this was a long column. I used to beg and plead the newspaper to exceed the limit because they had a limit of editorial columns. But since I did it every 5 years, I would plead with them saying, the heck with the limit, the word limit, let me praise all these people. And people appreciate that. They appreciate public accolades for what they have done. And I used to end the column also in the same way. So I said, all right, so if all of these people are doing all these wonderful things, what the heck am I doing? So I used to answer that question saying, you know, I occasionally get a good idea myself on a very rare day. But most of the time, the good ideas come from other people. And it's my job as president to hire these people who will have these awesome ideas and to facilitate their being able to implement these awesome ideas. So that's what my job is, to help other people excel. Similarly for the faculty. When I was president, what was my job? The faculty are going to do awesome things. It's my job to create the environment that helps them do those awesome things. So back to the question about the Zoroastrian faith. I believe that phrase. I also believe there's another phrase in our prayers that says you do good for the sake of doing good itself, for virtue itself. That's sometimes tough, but it, again, I believe that phrase. I think the caring for other people, the way I define myself is how can I facilitate someone else excelling? That is something that gives me great joy. This phrase does not come from a Zoroastrian, but it is something that I've used. When I was a kid in India, I was a president's scout, which is like an Eagle Scout, but I would say even better, because the president of the country presents you with the certificate. And the last line of that phrase, that certificate he gave me, this was President Radhakrishnan in 1966. He gave me the certificate that said, may your life be a joyous adventure in the service of others. So that is something that drives me. And the joyous is good. I actually enjoy it. So I don't think that helping others has to be a terrible thing that you're doing just because of service of God. No, of course you're doing it for service of others, but you can have fun doing it. And that's what I believe. I really believe it gives me great joy to help my students. It actually, I mean, it excites me. I go into class excited. In fact, one day when my daughter was growing up, or when she became a medical student, she said, I think I'm going to sue you for false advertising. My whole life, you've gone to work saying, woohoo, I'm going to work. I'm always excited. And she said, that's not what the way the real world is at all. So she said, I grew up with this crazy dad who always enjoyed his work. And that's not the way the world is. But I do believe in the joy. I do believe in having fun, but while serving others and helping my students excel, helping my children excel, my family excel. That's my job.
Okay, last question. This is one really important one, though. So, how would you like to be remembered by your future generations and your grandchildren, just the broad Zoroastrian community?
And that ties very well into what I've been saying. I believe in making significant contributions. So let me start with my professional life. When I came to the University of West Georgia, at that time it was called West Georgia College, I came with the idea of making it a university. And it was a tough task, but we did it. And then I wanted it to be an even greater university. I wanted it to be a bigger university. And finally got it to something called SACS level 6. So it's a technical phrase, so let me explain it. SACS is the accrediting body for all of the Southeast. It's called the Southern Association for Colleges and Schools. And all of the colleges and schools in this region, and the region is a huge region, from Virginia all down the coast past Georgia to Florida, and then westward towards Texas. That's SACS. SACS is huge. They have the highest level of university is called a level 6 university. So the most famous universities that you've heard of, University of Virginia, University of Georgia, Georgia Tech, University of Texas, all of these are SACS level 6 institutions. So it was my dream to make West Georgia a SACS level 6. And we did it. I say we because it takes a whole village to do it. And the day we did it, I knew I had achieved everything I wanted to. And shortly after that, I announced to the university and to my bosses and so on that that year would be my last year to give them time to find a new president. That year was 2012, 2013. So I stopped being president in 2013. So 19 years, during those 19 years, we increased the endowment by a factor of 10. We increased the enrollment. We increased the stature of the university. So I would certainly like to be remembered professionally as one who made significant contributions to the University of West Georgia. Again, I don't believe for a moment that this is done by one person. I believe I was able to accomplish everything I've accomplished, A, by the grace of God, and B, with wonderful colleagues, supporters, students, and so on. So nothing is an individual accomplishment. Remember my headline, don't look at me, somebody else did it. But yes, I was part of that, and I'd like to be remembered as part of that. By my students, I'd like to be remembered that I made a contribution to their lives, that I taught them, not just taught them stuff. I forget who it was that said, whether it was Einstein or someone else, that education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire, lighting of a spark. I hope I gave them a spark, that they could learn far more than I could teach them by themselves, that their minds were lit on fire. That's what I would like to do. And also that they enjoyed learning all this stuff. I have high standards, but I care for them. And I actually have put it in writing. In all of my syllabi, I have the same phrase. It says, this course has high standards, but I will help you get there. If I have to get down on my hands and knees and have you stand on my back, I will do it. If you want to stand on my shoulders are here for you to stand on. So again, I really believe this stuff. I don't just say it. If they need help, I will help them. I'll work time and time and time again to help them get better. And I've had enormous success stories. My students say these things about me, that actually some of them say that he really gets down on his hands and knees and helps us, that kind of thing. So they appreciate that. That's the kind of thing I'd like to remember. For my family, the same kind of thing, that I made a contribution to their lives, and I made it with love, because love is the driving force. I love my family incredibly. I am saddened when I'm not with them. I am happy when I am. They are my joy. And I want to be remembered certainly as a husband, a father, a grandfather, a professor, a president, a leader, a transformative leader, because we created transformative change here. So that's how I'd like to remember it. But all thanks to God.
Tell me more about this poster over here, some of these photos you have up here as well.
So this is the Carnegie Foundation selects approximately 30 to 40 people each year, immigrants. And they call them the great immigrants, the pride of America. So I was honored to be chosen as this group. And there's some, this is me over here, but there's some exceptional other people such as Satya Nadella, who is the CEO of Microsoft, and several other people as well. Just being in their presence is an honor for me. Let's move on to that picture up there. That's John Lewis, and he has written an inscription. He was here on campus as a commencement speaker, and he wrote a nice inscription to both my wife and me. This is President Jimmy Carter when both of us were younger. This is the former governor of Georgia, Roy Barnes. The other one is also former governor of Georgia, Sonny Perdue, who later became cabinet secretary and now is the chancellor. So we have a lot of important people up here in these pictures.
Thank you, Beheruz, for speaking with us. It was a pleasure. I'm Chase Gottschalk, and this was an interview for the FEZANA Fires Oral History Project. Thank you.